The alien princess thought her human husband was harmless, until his enemy's HFY Princess Lyra of the Velti Empire looked out over the wide glass balcony, her long silver hair brushing against the cool air. Below her, the city of Serevan stretched in shining towers, glowing softly under the twin suns. She had grown up knowing power, knowing command, and knowing fear. The Velti had ruled this part of the galaxy for generations, and Lyra had always been trained to see weakness, to avoid it, to never trust it. Yet here she was, about to marry a human, a species she had been taught to see as fragile and simple. Ethan Brooks stood at the far side of the balcony, hands loosely folded, looking out at the city as though he belonged to it. He was unremarkable by Velti standards. Average height, average build, plain brown hair, and calm blue eyes that seemed too gentle for the alien court. He wore a simple dark suit, the fabric tailored to fit him, but without the heavy ornamentation Velti nobles favored. He did not shine, he did not glimmer, he did not make anyone bow to him. He simply stood, quiet, watching. Lyra studied him. She had expected someone dramatic, someone commanding, someone who could carry the weight of the empire beside her. Instead, she had a man who smiled too politely, who asked too few questions, who seemed harmless. The Velti royal advisors whispered among themselves, some openly doubting the choice of a human consort. What could a human possibly give us? They asked each other. He will be a symbol only, nothing more. Lyra had her own doubts. When she first met Ethan, she noticed how calmly he had listened to her, how he had not flinched at the opulent palace, the alien rituals, or the strange forms of respect the Velti expected. He had observed, always observing, never rushing, never showing fear. She remembered thinking, how fragile, how harmless. That thought lingered, even now, as the ceremony approached. The palace was alive with preparations. Servants floated along in anti-gravity lifts, carrying trays of crystalline glasses and delicate foods that glowed with biolight. The halls were filled with the smell of alien flowers and the soft hum of energy conduits. Guards in silver armor stood at attention, eyes scanning the vast gathering hall. The guests were a mix of Velti nobles, merchants, and a few other alien dignitaries, all whispering, all watching. The marriage was not just a union of two beings. It was a statement, a symbol of peace between humanity and the Velti Empire. Ethan moved through the palace with ease, greeting those who approached him with polite nods and soft words. He did not boast, did not demand attention, did not flaunt his presence. Yet some noticed small details, the subtle way his hands rested near his belt, the way his eyes scanned the room, the slight tension in his shoulders, ready for any sudden movement. To most, it seemed like nothing. To Lyra, she only saw calmness, or so she thought. She remembered the first time they had truly spoken alone. The balcony had been empty, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. He had asked her about her dreams, her fears, the weight of ruling a people so different from him. He had listened patiently, nodding, never judging. She had expected weakness or ignorance, but instead she found understanding. Still, she could not see beyond the calmness. She could not see what lay beneath the surface, the depth of a human mind trained to survive in ways Velti warriors could not imagine. The morning of the wedding arrived with a pale golden light. Ethan dressed simply, a dark suit with a subtle emblem of Earth stitched near his sleeve. He looked ordinary, yet Lyra felt a strange comfort in his presence. She adjusted her gown, a flowing garment of shimmering silk that reflected the twin suns, and she could hear the quiet murmurs of the court. The human, they said, so fragile, so ordinary. She felt a flicker of pride and irritation at their whispers. She knew, deep down, that they did not understand humans. But she had not yet learned how much she would need to. The ceremony was grand. The hall was filled with light that bent in strange ways through crystal prisms. Alien melodies drifted through the air, vibrating against the walls in harmonies humans could feel in their bones. Velti nobles bowed, their voices rising in chants that honored the empire, the princess, and the joining of two worlds. Ethan stood beside Lyra, hands at his sides, eyes forward. He did not falter, did not look nervous. He simply existed, as though he had always belonged in this alien place. The priest, an ancient Veilti with eyes like polished stone, began the ritual. Words of binding, of loyalty, of shared destiny, echoed through the hall. Lyra took Ethan's hand, feeling the warmth of his skin. The court watched, expecting a human to falter, to shrink under the weight of alien expectation. But Ethan's grip was firm, calm, and resolute. He smiled faintly, a small gesture that spoke of trust, of strength, of patience. After the ritual, the court offered gifts. Alien nobles brought devices that could manipulate energy, artifacts of immense power meant to impress or intimidate. Ethan received them all with quiet gratitude, examining some briefly, politely deflecting others. The Veilti expected awe, or perhaps fear, but they found only composure. Lyra watched, her curiosity growing. There was a confidence here she could not name, a calm that did not belong to someone who was supposed to be ordinary. Later, in the private gardens of the palace, Lyra walked with Ethan along paths lined with luminescent flowers. Water flowed in delicate streams, reflecting the light of the twin suns and the distant stars beyond. She tried to speak casually, to learn more about the human beside her. "Do you miss your home?" she asked. He nodded, glancing at the stars. "Sometimes," he said softly. "But I also know that home is where we make it. And right now this is home. With you." Lyra felt a strange pull in her chest. His words were simple, almost too simple for the gravity of her world, yet they carried weight. He did not boast, he did not command, he did not demand. He only existed with purpose, calmness, and an underlying resolve she could not yet comprehend. She shook her head, thinking he was harmless, merely quiet. She did not yet see the depths of a human's patience, nor the subtle strength that had carried Ethan through far harsher trials than any Veilti could imagine. The days that followed were filled with training and instruction. Lyra introduced Ethan to the responsibilities of the court, to the strategy meetings, to the complex politics that governed alien diplomacy. He listened, asked questions sparingly, but always carefully. The Veilti officers looked on, some scoffing, some curious. They assumed he would falter, that he would show fear or ignorance. But Ethan absorbed every detail, remembering, analyzing, and quietly preparing. Lyra observed, still underestimating him, still believing him gentle, still believing that humans were fragile in the face of true power. One evening, Lyra and Ethan sat in the palace library, surrounded by tall shelves of glowing texts. She noticed him reading an old Veilti manual on tactics, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You do not seem afraid of learning," she said. He looked up, calm. "I do not fear knowledge," he said. "Fear is wasted energy. Understanding is not." She smiled faintly. His words were simple, yet carried a weight she could not define. He seemed harmless, yet she felt a flicker of unease. Weeks passed. Life at the palace settled into a rhythm. Ethan adapted to alien customs, laughed politely at strange jokes, and walked with grace among the nobles. The court slowly grew accustomed to him, some even warming to the idea of a human consort. But whispers never stopped. "He is weak," some said. "He is nothing." Lyra heard them, and she wanted to defend him, but even she was caught in her own assumptions. She believed him harmless, a symbol of peace, and nothing more. She had no idea how wrong she was. One night, as the twin moons rose over the palace, Lyra dreamt of war. Not the wars of her ancestors, not the battles of the Veilti, but a human war, cold, calculated, and unstoppable. In her dream, she saw Ethan leading armies, commanding with precision, striking with force that seemed quiet yet absolute. She woke with a start, the sheets tangled around her. She told herself it was only a dream. Ethan could not be like that, she thought. He was gentle, harmless, human. But, deep inside, something told her that she had underestimated him. She did not yet know why, but the quiet confidence she had seen in him, the calmness that never wavered, was more than it seemed. She could not yet see the storm that lay beneath the surface, the strength that would one day protect her and terrify her enemies. For now, she told herself he was harmless. For now, she allowed herself to believe in the simple, gentle human she had married. Yet the galaxy was not at peace. Old shadows stirred, and enemies long thought gone were beginning to move again. Ethan sensed it, as humans always did. Lyra did not yet see it. She would learn soon enough that humans were never truly powerless, and that the quiet, gentle ones were often the most dangerous of all. As the first part of their life together closed, Lyra walked beside Ethan in the palace gardens, under the soft glow of the twin moons. She smiled at him, thinking she knew him fully. She did not. She could not know, not yet, the depth of the human strength that had chosen her, protected her, and would soon shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. Days passed quietly in the Veilty Palace, but beneath the calm surface, shadows were moving. Ethan Brooks had begun to notice small signs that told him old enemies were awake again. His human instincts, honed by years of careful observation and survival, picked up things the Veilty did not see. A messenger who lingered too long, a ship that should have gone on its way yet remained near the outer orbit, whispers and strange languages that hinted at plans forming far away. Ethan said nothing to the court. He had learned long ago that panic was useless, and that acting before the moment was right could be just as dangerous as waiting too long. Princess Lyra noticed him becoming more distant at times. He still smiled, still attended to his duties, still seemed harmless to the court, but there was a new weight in his eyes. She asked him one evening as they walked through the palace gardens, "Is something wrong?" Ethan shook his head gently. "Nothing is wrong now. Only shadows are moving. Nothing we cannot handle." He spoke calmly, but his words had a firmness she had not heard before. She dismissed it, telling herself he was cautious, not dangerous. She did not yet understand that this quiet human was already preparing for a storm she could not see. The Veilty court continued to prepare for the celebrations marking the union of humans and Veilty. There were festivals, performances, and diplomatic meetings. Aliens from neighboring systems arrived, their strange forms and colors filling the palace halls. Ethan moved among them with polite attention, learning names, remembering details, noticing every small action. He asked few questions, but when he did, they were precise, revealing an understanding that the Veilty could not match. Lyra watched him, still thinking he was merely clever, not realizing the depth of his skill. One night, while the palace slept under the glow of the twin moons, Ethan left quietly. He traveled to a small command room hidden deep beneath the palace, a room built long ago for emergencies. Here, he connected with human allies scattered across nearby star systems. His fingers moved quickly over controls, opening channels, and sending encrypted messages. He did not explain himself to anyone. He did not boast. He only acted. Lyra would have seen this as strange, unnecessary, or even timid. But, in truth, he was weaving a safety net that few could ever imagine. Back in the palace gardens, Lyra noticed strange ships in the distant sky. She did not recognize them at first, but Ethan's face tightened when he saw them. He said nothing aloud. Instead, he guided her back to the palace quietly, his steps deliberate. The Veilty guards noticed nothing unusual. The court continued their routines, and Lyra felt only a faint unease. She had no idea that the human she thought harmless was already planning how to defend them all. As the days went on, small incidents began to occur. A supply ship disappeared near a trade route, messages from neighboring systems were delayed, and rumors of attacks on human colonies reached Ethan quietly. He spoke to no one except Lyra, who still believed he was simply being cautious, careful, but harmless. In private, he explained nothing about strategy or history. He only trained, observed, and prepared. He ran simulations in his mind, considered all outcomes, and remembered the lessons of humanity's past, a species that survived not because of raw power, but because of patience, intelligence, and the willingness to act when the time was right. One afternoon, Lyra found him studying an ancient Veilty war map. She peered over his shoulder, curious. "Why do you study this?" she asked. He looked at her calmly. "To understand how they think. To know how to stop them before they strike," she frowned. She still thought of him as gentle, harmless, a man of words and calm gestures, not a man who could plan for war. She shook her head, smiling faintly. "You are worrying too much," she said. "Humans and Veilty are at peace. The past is the past, Ethan's eyes did not leave the map. Peace is fragile. The past is never gone. We must be ready. His voice was soft but firm, and Lyra felt a strange chill. The Veilty advisors began to notice small changes in Ethan as well. He asked questions that seemed simple but revealed a careful attention to detail. He moved through the palace with a quiet awareness, observing patterns and predicting outcomes that most Veilty could not even imagine. Some began to doubt him, others grew uneasy. A few brave ones whispered to each other, "Perhaps he is more than he seems. Perhaps humans are not so simple after all." Lyra heard these whispers but ignored them. She wanted to believe her husband was harmless, as she had always thought. One evening, a messenger arrived from a distant system, warning of an approaching fleet. The Veilty were slow to react, unsure if the report was real or a trick. Ethan took it in stride. He studied the report carefully, cross-checked it with intelligence he had quietly gathered, and then issued simple instructions to loyal human allies. He moved with efficiency, using logic and strategy that made the Veilty commanders uncomfortable. Lyra watched silently, realizing for the first time that there was a sharpness to him, a strength she had never noticed. But she still thought it was cleverness, not power. She still believed he was harmless. As the approaching fleet neared Veilty's space, Ethan worked quietly, coordinating defenses, positioning ships, and setting up traps. He did not need to shout orders. He did not need to show dominance. He simply acted, and his allies moved with precision. Lyra watched from the balcony, her heart tightening. She saw small ships maneuver perfectly, larger ships holding positions that seemed impossible, and an unseen hand guiding everything with careful patience. The Veilty court remained oblivious, convinced that humans were weak and incapable of defense. Lyra's unease grew. She began to see that the human beside her was not as simple as she thought. One night, as the twin moons hung low in the sky, Lyra confronted him in the palace gardens. "Ethan," she said softly, "you are hiding something. I can feel it." He turned to her, calm as always, but his eyes held a weight she had not seen before. "I am not hiding," he said. "I am preparing. We cannot stop everything, but we can stop the things that matter most. Peace is fragile, and enemies are patient. I only make sure we are ready." She looked at him, searching for fear, for uncertainty, for weakness. She found none, only quiet, steady determination. Days later, the first sign of the enemy appeared. Small ships entered Veilty territory, scouts sent to test defenses. They were quickly intercepted by forces Ethan had quietly positioned. To the Veilty, it seemed as though luck or coincidence had protected them. Lyra, however, noticed the precision, the planning, the invisible hand guiding the response. She began to see that her husband was not just clever, he was dangerous in the way humans could be when survival was at stake. Still, she clung to the idea that he was harmless, that he would not harm unless absolutely necessary. She did not yet understand that human restraint could hide unimaginable power. Ethan spent long hours in the command room, running simulations, contacting allies, and quietly assessing threats. He never spoke of fear, never demanded recognition, never flaunted his skill. He simply acted, moving pieces on a galactic chessboard only he could see. Lyra watched him from the doorway sometimes, fascinated and confused. She wondered how someone so ordinary in appearance could command such control. She wondered how someone so gentle could wield such hidden strength. She still thought he was harmless, but doubts had begun to creep in. One evening, a scout returned with news of a fleet assembling near a distant asteroid belt. The Veilty commanders were unsure how to respond. Ethan studied the report, then quietly sent instructions to human allies and positioned Veilty defenses in ways that maximized efficiency and minimized risk. The Veilty generals grumbled, unconvinced, but followed his suggestions because they seemed simple and logical. Lyra watched in silence, beginning to understand that humans were not weak, not fragile, not simple. She saw the calm determination in Ethan, the quiet patience, the careful calculation. She saw the first signs that her husband, the human she thought harmless, was already preparing to confront threats no alien had fully anticipated. As the enemy fleet drew closer, Ethan briefed Lyra privately. He spoke simply, in words she could understand, yet every word carried meaning beyond what she knew. He explained how humans use strategy, patience, and understanding of their enemies to survive. He told her that humans never forgot, that humans never underestimated, and that humans always acted when the moment was right. Lyra listened, stunned. She had always believed in her instincts, in the Veilty view of power, but here was a human showing her an entirely different kind of strength, one that was calm, quiet, and terrifying in its precision. That night, Lyra lay awake in her chamber, staring at the twin moons, thinking of the human beside her. She realized for the first time that she had been wrong. Ethan was not harmless. He was not simple. He was a force in disguise, a mind honed by survival, patience, and the ability to act decisively when needed. She did not yet understand the full extent of his power, but she could feel it, a quiet tension in the air that had begun to shift the balance of her world. As part 2 of their story closed, shadows gathered at the edge of Veilty space. Unseen enemies moved, preparing to test the defenses of the Empire. Ethan was ready, calm, and patient. Lyra was beginning to see the truth, the first hint of a power she had never imagined in a human. She still did not know what would happen next, only that her world, her empire, and her understanding of strength were about to change forever, that the calm of Veilty space shattered without warning. The enemy fleet had arrived, dark silhouettes cutting through the stars like knives. They were not large, but they were fast, well-armed, and coordinated, a force that had studied the Veilty weaknesses carefully. The palace alarms echoed through the halls, strange red lights flashing as the court scrambled to respond. Veilty generals barked orders, their voices sharp with fear and frustration. Lyra stood at the balcony, staring at the fleet with wide eyes. She had never imagined such a sight. Her human husband, she thought, would simply stand beside her, powerless, harmless. She could not have been more wrong. Ethan Brooks moved quickly, but calmly. He did not shout. He did not panic. He did not show fear. He simply walked to the command room, his steps deliberate, his mind already calculating. He accessed the control panels, activated communications channels, and began issuing precise commands. Small defensive ships, already in position thanks to his earlier preparations, moved with perfect timing. Larger Veilty vessels followed his lead, maneuvering in ways the alien commanders had never practiced. Lyra watched in awe as the human she had thought harmless transformed into a figure of absolute control. The enemy fleet struck first at the outer defense line. They expected chaos, but instead they met resistance that seemed almost invisible. Ethan's ships moved like shadows, intercepting attacks, disabling weapons with surgical precision. Veilty soldiers looked at him in disbelief. Some began to whisper among themselves, "How is a human controlling this? He should be helpless." Lyra could only stare, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. The calm, gentle man she had married was orchestrating a defense that no alien mind had predicted. As the battle raged, Ethan monitored every movement. He adjusted positions, redirected fire, and predicted enemy maneuvers with uncanny accuracy. He had learned to read patterns from his human training, from wars fought long before the Veilty had even known humans existed. He understood strategy not as a matter of force, but of timing, patience, and precision. Each decision he made seemed small, almost simple, but it was deadly. Every calculation saved lives and kept the palace safe. Lyra felt a mixture of fear, pride, and astonishment. She had underestimated him completely. In the midst of the chaos, a group of enemy ships broke through the outer defenses, heading directly toward the palace. Lyra's heart raced. The Veilty guards moved to intercept, but the intruders were faster and stronger than anticipated. Ethan noticed immediately. Without hesitation, he activated a series of hidden energy fields and traps he had quietly prepared over weeks. The intruders were caught off guard, their ships disabled and immobilized before they could even fire properly. The Veilty generals could not believe it. Lyra could only watch, her mind trying to reconcile the gentle human she knew with the force she was witnessing. One of the enemy leaders, a tall alien with armor like black glass, attempted to communicate, sending a message demanding surrender. Ethan studied the message calmly, then responded with words that were simple, polite, but terrifying in their certainty. He did not threaten in anger. He did not boast. He stated the facts: surrender now or face complete defeat. The message was short, precise, and effective. The enemy paused, confused, unsure how a human could command such control. Lyra saw fear flicker in their eyes. She had never seen humans inspire fear like this, and yet here it was, flowing quietly from the man she thought harmless. As the battle continued, Lyra realized something she could not ignore. Ethan's calm was not weakness. His patience was not hesitation. Every quiet decision, every small movement, was the result of understanding the enemy completely. He knew their strengths, their weaknesses, and their minds. He could see possibilities no Veilti could even imagine. The gentle blue eyes she had once considered harmless now burned with focus, intensity, and the kind of power that demanded respect. The enemy tried again, coordinating a new strike aimed at the palace itself. They had assumed that humans were weak, that the consort would be a distraction, that the Veilti would be unprepared. Ethan anticipated every move. He had already predicted this strike and positioned ships and energy barriers perfectly. When the attack came, it was intercepted before it could reach the palace walls. Explosions lit the sky, but the palace remained untouched. Lyra felt her chest tighten with awe and fear. Her human husband, the man she had believed gentle and harmless, was saving them all with skill and precision beyond her understanding. Amid the battle, Ethan noticed a small squad of elite attackers who had managed to slip through. They were fast, deadly, and trained to kill, but Ethan was faster. He moved his personal shuttle into position, intercepting them before they could reach the palace surface. Using a combination of evasive maneuvers, precise fire, and carefully timed disruptions, he disabled them one by one. The enemy had expected him to panic, to falter, to surrender. They found only a human calm and lethal in his execution. Lyra watched from above, frozen with disbelief. She realized that she had completely misjudged her husband. When the first phase of the attack ended, the enemy fleet began to retreat, confused and shaken. Ethan did not celebrate. He did not smile. He continued monitoring communications, making sure no hidden forces remained. The Veilti generals crowded around him, asking questions, seeking explanations. He spoke simply, clearly, and without arrogance, giving instructions that were easy to follow but impossible to challenge. Lyra saw the respect in their eyes, the quiet fear. They were seeing what she had only just begun to understand. Humans were not weak. Humans were not fragile. Humans were deadly when pressed. And even the most graceful alien warriors could not match them in cunning and strategy. Lyra herself felt a mix of emotions. Pride, awe, fear, and love all collided inside her. The man she had married, the one she had thought harmless, had saved the palace, protected her people, and defeated enemies who had underestimated him. She could not believe it. Every whisper in the court that had doubted him now fell silent. She realized that her assumptions about humans, about strength, and about power had been completely wrong. She had underestimated the one person she had trusted most. As the night wore on, Ethan reviewed the battle, checking reports, and ensuring the palace was secure. He moved silently through the command room, calm and methodical. Lyra joined him, watching over his shoulder as he worked. She wanted to ask questions, to understand, but the truth was too large, too immense. She realized that humans operated on a scale of patience, observation, and precision that she had never imagined. She had seen bravery, she had seen skill, but this was different. This was something beyond the Veilti mind, beyond any expectation she had. In the quiet hours after the battle, Lyra walked beside Ethan through the palace gardens. The air was cool, the twin moons reflected in the streams and fountains. She felt the weight of the day, the fear, and the relief. She reached for his hand, and he took it gently, calmly. She wanted to speak, to tell him she understood, but words failed her. Instead, she simply walked beside him, feeling the quiet strength that had protected them all. She had believed he was harmless, and now she knew the truth. He was a force unlike any other, a power hidden beneath calmness and simplicity. The Veilti court slowly recovered. Whispers spread of the human consort who had saved the palace. Stories of his skill, his calm, and his unseen strength circulated among nobles and soldiers alike. Some doubted, some feared, some admired. Lyra listened to these whispers and felt a strange satisfaction, mixed with awe. She knew the truth, the reality of what she had witnessed. The gentle man she had married, the human she had thought harmless, had done what no Veilti warrior could. He had protected the empire with quiet, unstoppable power. As the first wave of the enemy retreated into deep space, Ethan began planning for the future. He did not celebrate victory. He did not boast. He reviewed intelligence, analyzed movements, and anticipated what might come next. He understood that the enemies would regroup, that the galaxy was still dangerous, and that patience and planning were more important than pride. Lyra watched him, beginning to see the full depth of the human mind, the quiet intelligence that could predict, control, and overcome forces far greater than appearance suggested. That night, Lyra lay awake, staring at the twin moons, thinking of the events she had witnessed. She remembered the calm blue eyes, the gentle words, the quiet precision, and the deadly effectiveness of her husband. She realized that her assumptions had been wrong. She realized that humans were not weak, were not fragile, were not simple. She realized that she had married a man who could, with patience and skill, change the fate of an empire, and who could, with quiet determination, protect her, the palace, and countless lives. As Part 3 closed, the first real test had passed. The enemy had attacked, believing the human harmless. They had underestimated him, and they had paid the price. Lyra now knew that her husband was not only clever and calm, but dangerous in ways that no alien had truly understood. She did not yet know what the next attack would bring, only that the gentle human she had married would be ready, and that the galaxy would never again underestimate humans. The calm had returned for the moment, but Lyra could feel it in her chest. This was only the beginning. The enemy had learned nothing yet. The human beside her, the one she had thought harmless, was already preparing for the next move. She held his hand tightly, silently promising herself that she would never again doubt him. She had married a man who could protect more than a kingdom. She had married a man who could, if necessary, shake the galaxy itself. The galaxy had begun to notice. News of the human consort, Ethan Brooks, and his calm yet devastating skill had spread quietly at first, but it did not stay hidden for long. Aliens who had long underestimated humans now spoke in hushed tones, their voices tinged with fear and disbelief. He had stopped an attack that no Veilti general could have predicted, saved the palace, and protected Lyra. Yet even as the Empire celebrated their survival, Ethan remained calm, studying, preparing, and planning. He did not seek praise. He did not seek power. He simply acted, because humans never waited for danger to arrive before preparing. Lyra watched him closely. She had begun to understand the truth of humanity, a truth that no Veilti teacher had ever shared with her. Humans were survivors, not because they were the strongest, but because they never underestimated their enemies and never wasted a moment. She remembered stories she had read as a child about human history, about wars, betrayals, and disasters that humans had survived through intelligence, cunning, and endurance. She had always thought of them as history, as distant tales. Now, she was seeing the same patterns unfold in the man beside her. He was history in motion, calm and precise, unstoppable when necessary. The Veilti court tried to keep order, but whispers of fear and awe continued. Diplomats and generals from neighboring systems visited the palace, some curious, some cautious. They asked to meet Ethan, to understand how a human could command so much attention with such quiet control. He greeted them politely, answered their questions with simple words, and revealed little. Yet every interaction left them unsettled, unsure how a single human could influence the outcomes of battles and the defense of an empire. Lyra noticed the subtle respect in their eyes, the hidden fear, and she understood that humanity had just begun to show its strength. One evening, a human intelligence report arrived, warning of a larger enemy coalition forming in the outer systems. Ethan studied it carefully, connecting pieces of information and predicting the enemy's next move. He did not rush to act immediately. He knew the enemy would strike when they thought the humans were unprepared. Patience was part of their power. He quietly contacted loyal human allies across the galaxy, coordinating movements, establishing defensive positions, and preparing contingencies. To the Veiltee, it seemed as though nothing was happening, yet everything was being set in motion. Lyra tried to understand his methods. She followed him into the command room one night, hoping to see what he was planning. She saw maps, communications channels, and data streams she could barely comprehend. Ethan noticed her gaze and smiled softly. "It may seem complicated," he said, "but it is only logic and timing. Every enemy has weaknesses. We only need to see them clearly." She nodded, but she felt both admiration and unease. She had thought him harmless, gentle, and kind. Now she realized that humans could hide unimaginable power beneath a calm exterior, and that power was dangerous to those who underestimated it. Over the next weeks, Ethan's quiet preparation began to show results. The Veiltee military, once overconfident and rigid, began to follow his guidance. They learned to think differently, to anticipate enemy moves, and to act with patience instead of brute force. Lyra observed as generals who had once doubted him started to show respect, some even humility. She saw the shift in the court, the recognition that humans could not be judged by appearance alone. She felt a mixture of pride and awe, knowing that her husband had done this without raising his voice or demanding recognition. The enemy coalition finally made their move. A fleet of heavily armed ships appeared near Veiltee territory, larger and more aggressive than the first wave. They expected chaos, assuming the Veiltee would be unprepared, assuming the human consort was harmless. Ethan had anticipated this, and he was ready. Small patrols intercepted enemy scouts, larger ships held precise formations, and hidden defenses struck at critical points. Every move was carefully calculated, every attack anticipated. The enemy realized too late that humans were never truly simple, and that their patience could hide devastating skill. During the battle, Lyra watched as Ethan coordinated defenses with calm precision. He spoke quietly to his allies, issuing clear instructions that seemed simple, but carried immense consequences. Enemy ships were disabled before they could fire, movements were anticipated and blocked, and no human or Veiltee life was lost unnecessarily. The alien generals began to whisper, "We have underestimated them. Humans are dangerous in ways we never imagined." Lyra felt both fear and pride. She had married a man she thought harmless, and now she understood that his calmness was a weapon, and his intelligence a shield stronger than any Veiltee armor. In the midst of the battle, one enemy commander attempted a daring strike aimed at the palace. Lyra felt her heart tighten. She expected chaos, screams, and destruction. Instead, Ethan moved calmly, activating hidden energy barriers and positioning ships to intercept the attack. The strike was neutralized with minimal damage. The enemy commander's ship was forced to retreat, confused and shaken by the human skill. Lyra realized fully that Ethan was not only protecting the palace, he was teaching the galaxy a lesson about humans. They were not fragile, they were not weak, and they were not predictable. After the battle, the Veiltee court gathered in stunned silence. Generals, diplomats, and nobles alike looked at Ethan with a mixture of fear, respect, and disbelief. Lyra stood beside him, her hand in his, her mind racing with new understanding. She realized that humans were not defined by appearance or size, but by strategy, patience, and the willingness to act decisively when necessary. She had thought her husband harmless, but now she saw that he was a force unlike any other. He had changed the way the Veiltee viewed humans forever. Ethan did not celebrate victory. He did not boast. He quietly reviewed intelligence, checked communications, and ensured that all defenses were ready for the next possible attack. He knew the enemy would regroup, that danger was not gone, and that patience and preparation were the true weapons of survival. Lyra watched him, understanding at last that humans did not need to show force to be powerful. They were deadly because they acted with understanding, timing, and relentless focus. As the days passed, alien systems that had once doubted humans began to treat Veilti territory with caution. Traders, diplomats, and spies reported stories of a human consort who had protected an empire with calm intelligence and precision. Some were fearful, some respectful, all aware that humans were not to be underestimated. Lyra heard these reports and felt a deep sense of pride. She realized that the man she had married, the one she had thought harmless, had changed not only their lives, but the perceptions of humans across the galaxy. One evening, Lyra joined Ethan in the gardens. The air was cool, and the twin moons reflected softly in the streams and fountains. She reached for his hand, feeling the quiet strength that had protected them all. "I understand now," she said softly. "I was wrong about you. I thought you were harmless." Ethan smiled faintly, still calm, still gentle. "Humans are patient," he said. "We do not rush. We do not show power unless we must. Sometimes calmness is stronger than force." She nodded, understanding the truth, and feeling the weight of the responsibility and the protection he carried silently. The galaxy had begun to change because of him. Enemy commanders reconsidered their strategies, neighboring systems reconsidered their alliances, and the Veilti themselves began to see humans in a new light. They realized that appearances could be deceiving, that gentleness could hide immense strength, and that patience could become the deadliest weapon of all. Lyra felt a mixture of awe and humility. She had married a man she once thought harmless, and he had revealed to her, and to the galaxy, the truth about humanity. As Part 4 drew to a close, the enemy coalition was in retreat, cautious and fearful, unsure how to respond to a human who did not raise his voice, who did not show rage, and yet controlled the outcome of battles with absolute precision. Ethan remained calm, quietly preparing for what might come next, knowing that patience and observation would always be the key to survival. Lyra stood beside him, her understanding complete. She had seen the danger, the intelligence, and the strength hidden in humans, and she knew that nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. She held his hand tightly, feeling the steady beat of confidence and power that he exuded without arrogance. She realized that she had underestimated humans for too long, that her assumptions had been wrong, and that the man she had married was a protector and a force unlike any she had imagined. The Veilti court, the galaxy, and even the enemy forces would all remember this lesson. Humans were not to be judged by appearance, and the calm ones were often the most dangerous of all. Peace had returned, but it was fragile. Lyra understood now that the galaxy would continue to test them, that enemies would rise again, and that humans would always be underestimated until it was too late. She looked at Ethan, the gentle, calm, seemingly harmless human who had just taught an empire the meaning of strength, and she smiled. She would never doubt him again. She had married not a man of weakness, but a man whose patience, intelligence, and quiet power could shape the fate of worlds. And, as the twin moons reflected in the streams of the palace gardens, Lyra felt a quiet certainty. Whatever threats might come, whatever enemies might strike, they would not be able to defeat the human at her side. She had learned the truth. Humans were patient, intelligent, and unstoppable when necessary, and her husband was living proof. The galaxy had begun to understand, and Lyra knew that humanity's full power had only just begun to reveal itself, that the calm that had returned to Veilti space was fragile. Though the enemy fleet had retreated, Ethan Brooks knew it was only temporary. He had spent weeks preparing, anticipating every possible move, yet the galaxy was vast, and threats could emerge from anywhere. Lyra walked beside him in the palace gardens, noticing the quiet determination in his posture. She had learned to read him now, to see the strength behind his calm. She had once thought him harmless, but the events of the past weeks had shown her the truth. He was a force of nature, patient, intelligent, and unstoppable when necessary. Reports arrived from distant systems. Small human fleets, previously hidden, had moved into positions, prepared to support Veilti defenses if needed. Ethan coordinated quietly with them, giving instructions that were simple to understand but deadly in execution. Lyra observed, realizing that the calm human beside her was controlling forces that stretched across the galaxy, not with arrogance or rage, but with absolute precision. He was calm, yet everywhere at once, seeing moves that no alien could predict. One day, a new threat appeared. A coalition of alien warlords, furious at their previous defeats, had gathered a fleet many times larger than the last. They believed the VLT and humans could be crushed together, assuming humans were weak and slow to act. Ethan studied the reports silently, analyzing every possible strategy, predicting every enemy move. He spoke to Lyra calmly. They will strike where they think we are weakest. But humans are patient. We will wait, and then we will act. Lyra nodded, knowing that patience in this human was never simple. It was deadly. As the enemy fleet approached, VLT generals grew nervous. They questioned Ethan's orders, arguing for immediate attacks, for displays of force. Ethan listened quietly, then explained simply, clearly, and with calm certainty why patience was stronger than rash action. He positioned the VLT ships to act as bait, luring the enemy into traps carefully set by his hidden human allies. Lyra watched in awe as the VLT soldiers followed his guidance, their confidence growing under the steady hand of a human they had once underestimated. The first wave of the enemy fleet entered VLT territory, and the trap was sprung. Hidden energy nets disabled multiple warships instantly. Human forces struck with precision, targeting command ships first. The enemy was confused, unable to understand how a human could predict their every move. Lyra saw fear ripple across the alien faces. Her husband, the gentle human she had married, was orchestrating a battle that no alien general could imagine. He moved calmly through communications channels, giving instructions, adjusting positions, and correcting mistakes before they could happen. Every action was simple, but its effect was overwhelming. The enemy regrouped for a second attack. They launched a massive strike at the VLT capital. Lyra felt her heart tighten, but Ethan remained calm. He had anticipated this. He activated hidden defenses, energy shields, and diversionary maneuvers. The enemy ships were funneled into narrow corridors where human and VLT forces struck with deadly accuracy. Explosions lit the skies, but the palace and city remained untouched. Lyra realized fully that her husband's calmness was not passivity. It was a weapon, invisible but unstoppable. In the middle of the battle, one elite squad of enemy commanders attempted to infiltrate the palace directly. Lyra gasped as she saw small ships slip past the defenses. Ethan noticed immediately. He did not panic. He deployed a series of countermeasures with precision timing, disabling the intruders before they could reach the palace. The enemy's finest warriors were stopped silently, without chaos, without waste. Lyra understood for the first time that humans could act decisively, quietly, and with results that no brute force could match. After the first full day of battle, the enemy fleet began to falter. Their commanders were unsure how to respond, confused by the precision and calm of the human forces. Ethan continued to issue instructions, guiding ships and soldiers with quiet confidence. He anticipated retreats, counterattacks, and hidden strikes. The VLT generals, who had once doubted him, now followed every order without question. Lyra stood beside him, her hand in his, feeling the steady power that radiated from the man she had married. As the enemy fleet attempted a final desperate strike, Ethan executed a brilliant maneuver. He used small human squads to cut off supply lines, hidden VLT ships to block escape routes, and energy fields to trap the remaining ships. The enemy was forced to surrender or be destroyed. They had underestimated humans, and they were paying the price. Lyra watched as the fleet, once confident and dangerous, fell into chaos and submission, realizing fully that humans were not fragile, not weak, and not simple. Her husband had revealed the true power of patience, strategy, and quiet resolve. In the aftermath, VLT nobles and soldiers celebrated cautiously, still shocked by what had occurred. Alien commanders who had once mocked humans now approached Ethan with respect and fear. Lyra listened to their whispers and felt pride swell in her chest. She had married a man who could shape the outcome of wars without rage or violence, only through understanding, planning, and timing. She realized that humanity's power lay not in strength alone, but in intelligence, endurance, and the willingness to act when necessary. Ethan did not boast. He did not celebrate loudly. He quietly debriefed allies, reviewed intelligence, and ensured defenses remained secure. Lyra watched him, understanding that this calmness, this patience, was far more powerful than any display of force. The enemy had learned a lesson they would never forget. Humans could be gentle, calm, and polite, and yet unstoppable. The galaxy itself had begun to see humanity differently, as a force that could not be ignored, a species that could change the balance of power without raising a voice. In the days that followed, Lyra began to understand fully what she had married. She walked beside Ethan in the palace gardens, under the soft glow of the twin moons. She reached for his hand, feeling the quiet strength and unwavering determination that had saved her, her people, and the Empire. "I understand now," she said softly. "I was wrong to think you were harmless. You are unstoppable." Ethan smiled faintly, still calm, still gentle. "Humans are patient," he said. "We do not need to show strength to have it. We only act when the time is right. And then we act completely." Lyra nodded, feeling the full weight and truth of his words. The Veilti court slowly recovered from the shock of the battles. Whispers spread of a human consort who had changed the course of a war. Diplomats from other systems approached cautiously, some to form alliances, some to avoid conflict. Lyra realized that her husband had not only saved her empire, he had also shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. Humans were no longer underestimated. The quiet ones, the calm ones, the gentle ones, could be the deadliest forces in existence. As the final enemy ships retreated, Ethan reviewed the situation one last time. He contacted human allies, confirming their positions and readiness. He ensured that every possible threat had been considered and neutralized. Lyra watched him, amazed at the precision, patience, and intelligence of her husband. She realized that humans were a species that never gave up, never underestimated their enemies, and always acted decisively when necessary. She had married not a simple man, but a protector, a strategist, and a force that could shape the fate of worlds. That night, Lyra stood with Ethan on the palace balcony, overlooking the city of Sereven. The twin moons reflected softly in the streams and fountains below. She looked at the man beside her, the human she had once thought harmless, and felt awe, love, and humility. "You have changed everything," she said quietly. Ethan took her hand gently. "I only protect what matters," he said. "I act when necessary, and I act with understanding. That is all humans do. We do not need to show power to have it." Lyra nodded, realizing fully that the galaxy had just witnessed the true meaning of human strength. In the days that followed, peace returned to Veilti space, but the galaxy had changed forever. The enemy fleets that had once been confident now moved with caution. Neighboring systems treated humans with respect and fear. The Veilti court, which had once whispered doubts, now held quiet reverence for the human consort. Lyra walked among them, proud and astonished at the man she had married. She knew now that he was not just a husband, but a protector, a teacher, and a force that could never be ignored. As the story of humanity's power spread, Lyra realized that she had been given more than a husband. She had been given a guardian, a strategist, and a partner whose calmness hid unimaginable strength. She understood that humans were not fragile, not weak, and not simple. They were patient, intelligent, and unstoppable when necessary. She had married a man who embodied all of this, and she would never again doubt his power, his skill, or his determination. The twin moons rose over the palace, casting silver light across the city. Lyra held Ethan's hand tightly, feeling the steady, quiet strength that had protected them all. She knew that whatever threats the galaxy might send, they would face them together, and humanity's true power would never be underestimated again. She had once thought her husband harmless. Now she knew the truth. He was unstoppable, patient, intelligent, and capable of protecting everything she loved. And in that knowledge, she found a deep, unshakable peace. The galaxy had learned a lesson, and Lyra had learned the most important lesson of all: never judge a human by their calmness, their politeness, or their gentleness. Sometimes, the quietest ones were the most powerful. Sometimes, the ones who seemed harmless were unstoppable. She had married one such human, and she would never doubt the strength of humanity again. The Empire was safe, the enemies defeated, and the galaxy had begun to respect, and even fear, the true power of humans. As Part 5 closes, Lyra stood beside Ethan on the balcony, the twin moons reflecting in their eyes. She knew that peace was never permanent, that threats would always exist, but she also knew that humanity's patience, intelligence, and quiet strength would always be ready. She had learned the truth, the full truth, about her husband, about humans, and about power. And she smiled, holding his hand, knowing that together, they could face any challenge, and that the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.